What's up, guys? I'm back. It's time for the WOYS Live Hour yet again. Thank you for joining me. I had a little family engagement last week. That's why I wasn't here for the live hour. Apologies for that. Who's watching today? Get in the comments. Let me know who's with me. Because today I want to talk about this crisis that seems to be brewing around Mark Carney. This crisis that seems to be developing real quick, and it looks like the Conservatives might fan the flames this week. They want to fan the flames on Mark Carney and create a few problems here and there for him. Will it work? That's what we're going to be getting into on the show today. Who's watching? If you're watching, get in the comments. Let me know who's with me today. I want to see you guys. Get in the comments. Shoot me a hello, a hi. Let's have a conversation today. Braveheart says hello, Braveheart. Sorry I wasn't here last week, but I'm here today. So as you guys come in, just get in the comments. Let me say hello to me, so I know who's in the comments, who's chatting me up today. Let me know if you can hear me clearly. My mic was giving me a few issues earlier, but I think I fixed it. Get in the comments, give me a thumbs up or something. Hey, Abby. Hello. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the WOYS Live Hour. If you can hear me good, just give me a thumbs up or something. But let's go. Is Mark Carney in a crisis? We saw after he signed that memorandum of understanding with Alberta, things have not been so rosy within his caucus. Is the story that we're hearing coming out of the Liberal caucus. We're hearing that we've seen obviously that Stephen Guilbeault resigned from cabinet. He's staying on. He obviously didn't go all the way towards the most dramatic thing he could, which would have been maybe to cross the floor to some other party. He didn't resign altogether from the party as an MP. He has just dropped his cabinet position. Still dramatic, especially because Stephen Guilbeault is such a high profile minister. Whatever you think of his actual influence, he's a pretty big name coming from Quebec, right? So with the resignation of Stephen Guilbeault has come discussions about fragmentation within the Liberal Party. We're talking about, Stephen Guilbeault was actually on CBC this afternoon talking about how there is a new environmental sub-caucus, if you like, in the Liberal Party. So that's division. These are divisions that are simmering within the Liberal Party. And this next week, the Conservatives are going to seek to put a bigger wedge in the Liberal Party. They're going to force these Liberal ministers, these Liberal MPs, they're going to force these liberals to take a stand on the MOU that Mark Carney went and signed on the pipeline. And there's talk that, Mark Carney has been running his party, he's been running the Liberal Party a bit like a CEO would. Not a lot of consultation. A lot of it seems to be a little bit his way or the highway. He doesn't seem to be negotiating very much or compromising on the positions that he holds in terms of how the party should proceed. He's very much, as we hear, ruling the Liberal Party, it seems, without a lot of seeking to form consensus. A lot of it is, the directive is what we hear. And so Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party want to drive a wedge in there and see if they can sow or make those fractures become more visible, less, underground, bring them to the surface. And I'll read you something, because this coming week, this week that we're in, which is the last week of Parliament, The Conservatives are going to put forward the motion. They're going to put forward the motion. So I'll read you a report here from CTV News. Conservatives are set to announce a House vote on the pipeline agreement with Alberta. So that's the MOU, right? And it goes on to say the Liberal government's pipeline agreement with Alberta will take center stage in the House of Commons next week, this time through a Conservative opposition motion. The Memorandum of Understanding signed last month between Ottawa and Alberta is one both governments were happy with, but the federal Conservatives want to put Prime Minister Mark Carney's pipeline pledge to the test. Liberals have to unify behind the words they promised in the MOU they signed, said Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in an interview with CTV News. A Conservative opposition motion expected in the House of Commons on Tuesday and shared online by Pierre Poilievre shows they'll use almost the same wording as the agreement between Ottawa and Alberta and force a vote on it in the House of Commons. So let me read you what this motion that Pierre Poilievre I'll read you the motion that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are going to put forward in order to create the needed friction within the, well, not create, but expose the friction within the Liberal Party. Well, this motion is going to say, and Pierre Poilievre put this out on X. He said, we need a new pipeline to the Pacific. On Tuesday, the House of Commons will vote on a Conservative motion for a new pipeline to the Pacific coast, overriding the tanker ban to ship bitumen to Asia. Bring home jobs, put Canada first. Anyways, the opposition motion actually says here, A, take note of the Memorandum of Understanding between Canada and Alberta of November 27, 2025. So that first part, the A part of this motion, the Conservative motion, is basically to force them to acknowledge that it happened, that it exists, that this MOU actually happened. Well, that's not the hard part. Well, the B part of this is where it starts to get interesting. Pierre Poilievre in this draft, it says here, B supports the construction of one or more pipelines enabling the export of at least 1 million barrels a day of low emission Alberta bitumen from a strategic deep water port on the British Columbia coast to reach Asia's markets, including through an appropriate adjustment to the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, while respecting the duty to consult indigenous peoples. Okay, so that is the big net that obviously this is a trap, right? It's a it's a trap. I don't know how else to say this. This is a trap by Pierre Poilievre designed to expose the fractures within the Liberal Party. And the wording is brilliant, really. It's absolutely brilliant. Because we know that there are members of that Liberal caucus who do not agree with the direction that the Liberals are taking they're taking in terms of like environmental policy, in terms of even investments in LNG and those kinds of things. There are people within the party, within the Liberal Party, that do not agree with this direction. And Stephen Guilbeault has even said there's an environmental caucus forming within the Liberal Party, right? And now Pierre Poilievre is he will force those people, those MPs, presumably who are in BC, who are in Quebec, to take a stand. Do you support a pipeline or do you not support a pipeline? Right? Now, that is, I'm trying to pick my words carefully. that is not going to be an easy position to take. You might be like, okay, I mean, it should be simple enough. Do you agree to a pipeline or do you not agree to a pipeline? Well, see, here's where it gets complicated. And you guys get in the comments, tell me what you think. Do you think this is a brilliant move by Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives? Do you think yeah, so I want to know from you guys, do you think this is a brilliant move from the Conservatives? Do you think it the value? Do you think the juice is worth the squeeze here? Because I mean, I can tell you what I think is going to happen here, but I'm curious what you guys think. The conservatives are clearly trying to set a trap here, and I want to tell you why this is I think this is brilliant, because on the one hand it's brilliant in the sense that you have these MPs, especially from Quebec, especially from British Columbia, who, you know, in their provinces there's a lot of opposition to this pipeline, to any pipeline to the BC coast. And so the conservatives they're basically going to force these MPs to take a position against or for a pipeline. If they take a position for a pipeline, well, they're probably going to pay for that in the next election, because the people who sent them over are going to go, well, we didn't vote for big oil, right? There is that. But if they vote against this, well, you know that. So let me get your comments here. Braveheart says, why does Quebec get a say? Is PP trying to divide the Liberals? Will Alberta turn against him? That's a good direction we can go with this. Will Alberta turn against the Conservative Party? Because I mean, there is kind of a weird bet that Mark Carney has made with this memorandum of understanding with Alberta. He has created a problem. I think that Mark Carney has created a problem for himself in Quebec, because Quebec, rightly or wrongly, keeps putting their nose in the middle of Alberta's right to pursue a chance to export oil to the Pacific. For some reason, Quebec keeps putting their nose in there. I don't know why Quebec keeps getting involved in that. It's not their fight. It's not their discussion. If the federal government and Alberta are seeking to find an agreement that will get Alberta more exports to Asia, I don't know why Quebec is getting involved. And so that's a good question to ask. Why does Quebec get a say? But for some reason, Quebec seems to be quite often gets angry with some of the subsidies that the federal government extends for oil in Alberta and those kinds of things. But I think they should just, stay in their own lane on this, to be fair. Is Pierre Poilievre, your other question was, is Pierre Poilievre trying to divide the Liberals? 100% he's trying to divide the Liberals. Or, I should say, the Liberals are already divided, and Pierre Poilievre is trying to make that a public division. He's trying to make it so, those people who are not in favor of how Mark Carney is running things, well, if you have to vote on a matter, and that's public at that point, right? It's those people so far that don't agree, barring Stephen Guilbeault and Nate Erskine-Smith, they've been largely quiet. They've been on the download. They haven't really spoken up, right? With a vote, you can potentially find, he potentially can expose more of these divisions within the Liberal Party. And your other question, your final question there, will Alberta ever turn against Pierre Poilievre? Come on, all of you say it with me in the comments. The answer is absolutely not. I don't, and this is a risk that I think Mark Carney is taking. I don't know, maybe it will happen. It would surprise me. It would really surprise me if Mark Carney is actually able to find a solution that gets him more than I think the Liberals only have one seat in Alberta at the moment. And this is a risk that Mark Carney is running on at the moment, right? He has taken this chance, and that's what I call it, to try and appease Alberta. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, no pipeline is going to materialize out of the MOU that Mark Carney signed with Alberta. That's a little bit short-sighted in my mind. I think there's more to be gained than just a pipeline. I mean, he has rolled back things like the emissions cap. He has rolled back the clean energy regulations, which are things that Alberta wanted. So there are a few more things that could be gained from this memorandum of understanding with Alberta. apart from just a pipeline, right? And here's a crazy thing. And this is something I'm starting to understand, I think I'm seeing materializing from the strategy that Mark Carney and Danielle Smith have taken here. I think, and this is a hot take, Mark Carney and Danielle Smith are using a bit of a Trump tactic here, where I don't think their end game is necessarily a pipeline to the BC coast. I'll tell you why I say that. When we started this, and you guys get in the comments, tell me what you think. I don't think a pipeline to the BC coast is necessarily going to materialize. But I'll tell you why I think Carney and Danielle Smith decided to put this on the table in the first place. I think they're doing a bit of a Trump thing. You know this thing that Trump does where he goes for the biggest, craziest thing that you have ever heard? And immediately people are up in arms like, nah, we ain't doing that shit. And eventually, Trump usually comes back to something that's still crazy, but compared to what he was saying in the first place, it doesn't seem as crazy anymore. And suddenly you find yourself accepting something that would have been absurd if it was suggested in the first place. You now accept that as absolutely fine. And I'll tell you why I say that in this case for Mark Carney and for Danielle Smith. Mark Carney and Danielle Smith have started from a position of saying, we want a pipeline to the BC coast. To the BC coast. And the coastal First Nations have been like, absolutely not. You're not getting a pipeline going out there. We can't risk it. You know, that is not, we don't want it. Okay. Guess what? David Eby has since, the premier of BC has since said, well, we're actually open to you maximizing the capacity of the Trans Mountain pipeline, the TMX pipeline, the one that Justin Trudeau built to serve Alberta, really. Okay, so Wovenhart says, MOU is just the beginning now. MOU is just the beginning now. First Nations and BC. People freak out because he gave his position, not his membership. This crap happened all the time. The MOU sets the opening bid. I agree with that, Wovenhart. It is just the opening bid. It is just the opening salvo. It is just the start. And I'll get back to my point I was saying about them going big and then sort of eventually settling on something moderate. David Eby, the premier of BC, has now sort of, after starting off going, absolutely not. We disagree with this. It is never going to happen. It is not a real project. All those things. David Eby, the same David Eby, is now saying, well, actually, we are fine with you expanding the capacity of the TMX pipeline. That's okay with us. Here's another thing I heard David Eby say recently. Apparently, they're fine with another pipeline going to Vancouver, as long as it's not going to the coast, like going through like First Nations territory up in the coast there, right? So you can see now that David Eby is softening his position and coming to something that maybe is probably a decent solution for Alberta, really. Because, I mean, if we're going through maybe a similar route as the TMX, there's probably less opposition there. Wovenhart says, December 1st, Angus Reid poll, Carney 52%, PP in the... Yes. You're right, Wovenhart. Mark Carney does hold a 28-point lead on Pierre Poilievre as the preferred Prime Minister of Canada. That is correct. Now, I've been open and I've told everybody that would listen to me that Pierre Poilievre, in my opinion, is never going to beat Mark Carney. That's my opinion on this matter. Okay? I think that bridge between the preferred leader is probably too far for Pierre Poilievre to ever cross. That is just my opinion. You can disagree, get in the comments, let me know what you think. Now, I think that Pierre Poilievre will hang on as long as he can. Right? Now, with this motion that Pierre Poilievre has put forward, I think the goal is to put those MPs from Quebec and the MPs from BC in a position where they basically have to go against their constituents in a little bit, or they abstain. Right? This is not a confidence matter, so they can abstain. But there's a message that sends politically that is maybe not good for them, right? So he's forcing them to come out and take a stand, and in the process of taking a stand, that could hurt them in their constituencies, which are maybe possibly progressive. And in those places that are progressive, that can help the NDP, for example. I don't know that he's deliberately trying to help the NDP, but if those progressive voters now without a home need somewhere to go, well, the NDP is there saying, well, we'll welcome you with open arms. You have Avi Lewis, who is contesting to be the leader of the NDP right now. Anthony Young says not a hope. Jeez. But I mean, the Conservative Party still believes in Pierre Poilievre. I think if they switch to another leader, here's what I would like to see. And I've said this much. I think the Conservative Party should decide on whether Pierre Poilievre stays on as leader, not based on how popular he is right now, not based on how much they think he grew the Conservative Party, because I don't think he grew the Conservative Party as much as people think. And I've explained this before. He is in the exact same position as friggin' Andrew Scheer was and as Erin O'Toole were. He's in a minority government. How is this any different? And I'll tell you another reason why I always disagree when people say Pierre Poilievre grew the Conservative base. He didn't win the popular vote. Andrew Young says PV will be our next PM. Okay. I can let you have your. See, the beauty of this channel is you can have any opinion you want, and I entertain your opinion. So, what was I saying? I think that the whole point of this is, for the whole point of this motion from Pierre Poilievre is, yes. So, Wolvenhart says it was anti-Trudeau that grew the progressive Conservatives. What progressive Conservatives? You mean the Conservative Party of Canada? Because the progressive Conservatives are not very relevant on the national stage. Wolvenhart. Colin Grandy says Andrew Scheer had 32% of the votes. Pierre had over 40%. You're not listening to what I'm saying, Colin. What I said was, yes, Pierre Poilievre won 40% of the vote. I can agree with that. But did he actually win the popular vote? No, he didn't. So, on the balance of the value of the votes that he won, he's not forming government. He's in a minority situation just like Andrew Scheer was. And he did not win the popular vote, so he doesn't have that credence. That is my point when I say he didn't do as well as you think he did. Right? Yes, he won 40% of the vote, but he also polarized the voting base enough that he lost more than 40% of the vote. That's why he didn't win the election, right? That's what I'm saying to you, right? So, Anthony Young says the vote, well, yes. And why did the NDP vote collapse, Colleen Grandy? The NDP vote collapsed because Pierre Poilievre created a situation where enough people hated him enough that they were willing to throw their votes away on the Liberals in order to keep him out of office. So you have to weigh the two sides, is what I'm trying to say to you. You have to weigh the two sides. Anthony Young says the vote and the popular vote are two different points. Okay. Maybe I need a little bit more from you there. Okay, so Colin Grandy says Trump was the reason why Pierre Poilievre lost the vote. Well, here's my thing. Pierre Poilievre had the chance to respond to the Trump topic. He didn't do enough. Whose fault is that? He had 2 years where he was preparing for an election and he could not respond. That's on him. That's on him. Anyways, what was I saying? I was talking. I've departed from this MOU topic. So, do you guys think this MOU is going to create the necessary divisions within the Liberal Party that will eventually create problems for the Liberals in the coming next election? Because here's the thing: I don't think that. Okay, so Colin Grandy says no. Trump was the reason the NDP went with Carney. I don't think the NDP wanted to go with Carney. You mean the NDP voters? Trump was the reason why they went with Carney. Why do you say that? Why do you say that? I'll be curious to hear your reasoning on that. Why do you think NDP voters went, okay, Trump is coming, we're going to go with Carney? Why not Pierre Poilievre? I'll be curious, why did they think that, Carney was the solution as against Pierre Poilievre? I'm curious to hear your answer on that, Colin. So, Wolvenhart says, Poilievre spouts Maple MAGA and ran against Trudeau for the first couple of weeks. Legend has it that Pierre Poilievre is still running against Justin Trudeau till today, guys. Legend has it that, I don't know, legend has it that Pierre Poilievre is still running against Justin Trudeau till this day. Look, this, as I said, as I've still told you guys many a time, I don't actually mind Pierre Poilievre. I don't dislike Pierre Poilievre as much as people like to paint that on me. Colin Grandy says Poilievre is for pipelines. Why the NDP aren't? Yes, and let me go back to what we were originally talking about in terms of the MOU. Yes, Poilievre is for pipelines, and that means that in putting forward this motion, the Conservatives inevitably are going to vote for it, right? Because they want pipelines. Now, the trap for the Liberals is that, well, there are MPs that are from Quebec who won because, people bought into the possibility that Carney will stick to climate policies, to progressive climate policies. There are people in BC who voted Liberals because they wanted to vote against the Poilievre dimension, to the Poilievre approach to climate change and those kinds of things, right? So there are people from those sides who will now see the direction. Okay, so Anthony Young says, you want a country to be stable, vote Conservative. You know what? I actually have to put my hand up. I think that right now, for today, Canada does need a more conservative government. I got to agree with that. The question that has often kind of confounded many people is the answer to that, and I mean, you see right now that Mark Carney is doing his best impression of a conservative government while still being a liberal. It's kind of it's not the authentic liberal thing, but he's doing his best impression of a progressive conservative, if you like, right? And you know what? I can agree with that, Anthony Young, that Canada does need a more conservative government in a sense today. And obviously, that's why you see that Mark Carney is taking some of the positions he's taking and trying to lead from the right a little bit. Is what I've observed. I don't know what you've seen. And that brings me to, as I was saying, if you successfully create those conditions for the Liberals to collapse in Quebec, well, that favors the Bloc Québécois, right? The Bloc Québécois is going to be eating that up, right? Now, in BC, I expect the NDP will benefit from a collapse in the Liberal votes. Now, these don't directly benefit the Conservatives, but if the Bloc and the NDP are able to take some votes from the Liberals, the idea is that, well, Pierre Poilievre has, if he's able to retain the 40% or whatever that he won from the last election, and Mark Carney drops lower than what he won in the last election, we could see a situation where Pierre Poilievre narrowly beats Mark Carney. That is maybe the math that the Poilievres of this world are pursuing here. Woven Heart says NDP are still spouting the pipelines of old, the LNG, and are a lot more upgrades, including auto shutoffs and better sensors. I'm not really sure what you're saying, but I do know that amongst the people contesting to be the NDP leader, Avi Lewis, for example, the one of the guys contesting, is very much against anything oil and gas, including LNG. In fact, he said he was disappointed or something like that. I don't know the exact words he used. He said he was disappointed in the NDP Premier of BC, David Eby, for the fact that David Eby supported an LNG facility, an LNG development in BC, which was kind of interesting to me. And I hope that Avi Lewis is not the leader of the NDP, because I don't think Avi Lewis is going to, for now, for the next election, I don't think he's going to significantly improve the fortunes of the NDP. And I'll tell you why. When you look at, and this is a bet that Mark Carney is making right now, when you look at the issues, and Nanos did a poll on the top issues that Canadians have in mind at the moment. And here, the top issue concerning Canadians right now, 20% of the people they polled say the jobs and the economy are their biggest concern. Yeah. 11% say Trump and US relations. Okay. Inflation sits at around 9%. Healthcare seems at 8%. Immigration sits at 6.4%. The national debt sits at 5%. Do you know where environment and the environment ranks lower than all those things at 4.5%? So right now, people are going, give me my jobs, give me my friggin' jobs. I want good healthcare. Lower the immigration numbers. I want to be able to buy food, and we can deal with the environment later. That is effectively what the people are saying right now. Okay, so Bullshit Detector says the Keystone XL pipeline runs the entire length of Pierre Poilievre's Battle River Crowfoot riding and is not being used. Do you honestly think that douchebag doesn't know it's there? Oh my goodness. Oh, this is the way. That narrative, unfortunately, doesn't. That narrative is not something that you will have Pierre Poilievre. Obviously, Pierre Poilievre wouldn't like that narrative very much. And as I said, I think that Carney and Daniel Smith, their game plan is not necessarily to get a pipeline all the way to the BC coast. I think when all is said and done, BC is going to accept something that maybe sounded absurd in the beginning, but at some point, it's going to stop sounding so absurd to them. It's going to be the path of least resistance. They're going to accept, obviously a maximization of the TMX pipeline, right? They're already talking about if there's going to be a pipeline, it should be to Vancouver and not to the BC coast, right? Where there's a bit of contention about going through there, so slowly you're seeing that the people are so focused on this end game of a pipeline to the BC coast. There's so many other things going on here. That's not to say that Mark Carney, for those of you who are looking for a progressive picture, that's not to say that Mark Carney has completely abandoned his idea of what will work in terms of reducing emissions and stuff like that. If you're looking for a progressive picture, somehow Mark Carney got a conservative government in Daniel Smith to increase the carbon tax on its own citizens, right? Earlier, the Alberta had actually frozen their industrial carbon tax at $95 per. I think it was $95 per ton. And now in this MOU, we see that Mark Carney has gotten them to increase the industrial carbon tax on their own people. So some people might say an effective carbon pricing system is probably pretty effective at controlling emissions. We'll see. Okay. So and good point about the Keystone XL pipeline bullshit detector. That's a good point. On that and the fact that it runs through Battle River Crowfoot. Correct me if I'm wrong though, the bullshit detector. The Keystone XL pipeline was always meant to connect to the US. Let's see if I remember my pipeline trivia very much. The Keystone XL pipeline was that not the one that was supposed to connect to the US? Because if that is the one connecting to the US, that doesn't really serve us in this moment though. So that's just one point. Anthony Young says there will never be a pipeline, whoever the party is, until First Nations are at the table. Oh, you're saying until the First Nations at the table are out. Yes. Here's the thing. I actually want to ask you guys a question. We obviously have this situation where, by law, the federal government could, if they really wanted to, force a pipeline through anywhere they want. By law, right? That's something that the conservatives have been kind of trying to drum up, right? However, we have effectively chosen to give the First Nations a veto power over projects going through their territory. What do you guys think is the future of this position? I'm curious about that. Get in the comments, let me know. What do you think happens in 10 years or whatever? Do you think we continue to basically give this veto power or allow this veto power for First Nations? I'm curious about that. I'm curious what you guys think about that. Wovenheart says the biggest worry of the NDP was oil spills from pipeline, but both oil and LNG are more advanced now. Yes, and that is the argument that people pro oil are saying right now. Bullshit detector. I'll get to your comment pretty soon. Okay, so where was I? Okay, you're saying that Anthony Young, I want to get back to your comment. He says there will never be a pipeline, whoever the party is. And I guess, I mean, we've kind of seen this in practice though. But, I mean, there was a pipeline not too long ago. The TMX pipeline was built, right? And that wasn't that long ago. So, I mean, I feel like but you're right in the sense that as we go along, as the decades continue to pass, the case for building a pipeline will be less and less convincing. That's just the fact, right? Because we are slowly heading to an era of decarbonization. That is where we're going, right? So you're right. I mean, maybe who knows when the next time a conservative government is gonna be in power. There might not be much of a case for trying to force a pipeline at that particular point. Who knows? But I mean, as it were, when what's his name? When Stephen Harper was in government, he didn't force a pipeline. I don't know that he got a pipeline built. It is what it is. Anyways, okay, so where was I? Oh, Wovenheart says the biggest worry of the NDP. Okay, I read that already. That is true. The biggest worry is that there will be spills, and that will effectively ruin the coast essentially, because with bitumen, it's just gonna sink to the bottom, right? And it's gonna be an absolute pain to clean. That is the thing that the environmentalists have been saying. Bullshit detector says there already is a state-of-the-art pipeline that sits empty. Which pipeline are you talking about? Are you talking about the Keystone XL? Okay. So Anthony Young says native law and justice entails wind and snow. Okay. Bullshit detector says TMX is a joke compared to Keystone XL. Harper approved Keystone. Yes. Anthony Young says, I am conservative, the true meaning of Canada. Okay. Wovenart says, treaty lands are their land. It is law. What they want is to be approached first and involved in the decision as equals. BC and Alberta have veto power. So, you're saying what they want is to be approached first. Okay. But there are also certain projects that I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. There are also certain projects that, like a pipeline to the BC coast, that basically get a no before it's even suggested. We're seeing that right now, right? Because, I mean, there's not even a private proponent for said pipeline. There is not even a route, and the answer is already no. So your argument about saying, oh, they just want to be approached first, it hasn't proven to be accurate in this case. Now, they have been a little bit more open to, obviously we're talking about critical minerals today. We're talking about critical minerals in Mark Carney's agenda today. So there has been a little bit more flexibility on the part of First Nations at the moment. LNG projects are also going ahead a little bit more than they have been in the past. Maybe that is because of the situation that Canada is at the moment, Maybe that is what is. As I said, jobs and the economy are the biggest concern for Canadians at the moment. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what has made the First Nations a little bit more flexible these days. So Braveheart says, even if there is progress towards less use of fossil fuels, is Canada doing everything to be at the forefront of future technology? No, they're not. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about that actually. I mean, what you're saying, Canada, you got to realize to this point what we have, and this is a problematic situation for us. This is affecting not just our resource industries. This is also impacting things like lumber. We have been a little bit lazy. I gotta say that we have been kind of lazy about like moving beyond a resource heavy economy. There is that, right? There's also the fact that we, at the moment, we were trying to reorient towards future industries. For example, battery technology is something that the Trudeau government heavily invested in. Now we're seeing that the demand for electric vehicles and the use for that supply chain is not as robust as was expected, which is why, I mean, you now see that Mark Carney has kind of rolled back the electric vehicle mandate. Because, I mean, the demand just didn't the demand didn't support the need for a mandate, right? So, there have been future industries like that. I mean, right now, Canada is betting on AI and data centers and stuff like that. So, I think at the moment, Carney is trying to do both. That is my observation. I think he's trying to do both and orients Canada towards the future, but while also possibly trying to support to create the jobs we need today, keep us ticking over. Hence the support for LNG and stuff, right? Hence the support for critical minerals and those kinds of things. Bullshit detector says Keystone XL was designed to move a barrel per second to 6 terminals in the United States from the Hardesty terminal. Okay, so yes, you're right in saying that at the moment the U.S. is the only market. But what do you do when the U.S. says they don't want your oil? And they slap a 10% tariff on oil coming out of Alberta. What do you do at that point, right? What do you do? You just, the fact is, I don't know why Trump thought, even did that as against oil of all things, because the United States actually makes money off the oil, the bitumen that we sell them. So I couldn't. It makes zero sense to me why Trump would put a tariff on something that makes them money. I can't say I understand it. But you're right to say like most of our oil goes to the United States anyways. But I mean, you might have seen on CTV today, I think it was the Spanish ambassador or somebody from Spain was on the show with Vashi Kapelos, and they were talking about like, the possibility of Canadian LNG going to Spain. There have been several discussions like that going on. So yeah, maybe they're in the future, our only market doesn't have to be the United States. That's my point. Oh, so Anthony Young said food is up 57% in Canada, and it is expected. You better hold on to your wallet because food is expected to get more expensive next year in 2026. Not to ruin your Christmas or anything, but that was in the news about a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago. Food to get more expensive next year, even more expensive, guys. Like what? Like what are these people expecting us to eat at this point? Now, if this continues anymore, we're all going to Alberta. We're gonna chew on some bitumen, guys. That's what we're gonna eat. That's what we're gonna eat, you guys. Yeah. So, bullshit detector says Alberta does not need a pipeline to Kitimat. As I said, maybe that's the crazy request that will eventually be substituted with something a bit more moderate that people will be a bit more open to. And Anthony Young says taxes are up as well. Oh, my goodness. Bullshit detector says the MOU will increase taxes for Alberta by 37%. Yeah. And the fact that Alberta was based, I mean, that does reflect that Alberta was negotiating in good faith. I gotta give it to Danielle Smith on this, because she did make some concessions on her part, and Mark Carney himself made some concessions on some of the things like the emissions cap, things like the clean energy regulations, those kinds of things that Alberta said they wanted. But he definitely negotiated some of the things that he wanted as well, like an increase to the carbon price, right? Which Alberta might not have done otherwise. So I think it was a win-win on both sides. Danielle Smith gets to go back home with something, and with an expansion to the TMX, I think they'll be very happy in Alberta with this deal, even if a pipeline doesn't materialize. I think there's this, as I said, there's this tunnel vision that it has to be a pipeline to Kitimat. Maybe it doesn't. Think about it. Colin Grandy says oil exports to the United States have increased since the 10% tariff. Which, as I said, that's it doesn't make sense to me that Donald Trump would put 10% tariff on a product they make money on. It makes no sense. No sense. Like, why? Anyways, far be it from me to try and interpret what Trump is thinking. I don't even understand that. Yeah, but Trump has told you, bullshit detector, that he doesn't want your oil. You're not listening. He doesn't want your oil, but he keeps buying more, apparently. I don't know this. I don't understand, man. I don't understand. Bullshit detector says Alberta's deposit is heavy crude. It contains petrochemical polymers required to produce 92% of products. Yes, and that is a good perspective, I think. Thank you for bringing that in, bullshit detector. That is a good perspective to have. A lot of people just think oil is going to simply just go away. If we're not using it to fuel our industries, it's just going to go away. People forget that, plastics, all sorts of things come from their oil products as well, right? So there are several things that we use today that maybe don't have the same value in for price or volume as maybe oil would have, but there's still several use cases for the things that come out of oil. Good point, bullshit detector. Wovenart says you need all options. US says we won't. What? We won't beat. Okay, you can turn their tap off and turn China's on. Well, see, here's the thing. I think on China, I've been kind of saying that, well, if the United States is fighting us, why are we continuing to fight with China by keeping their EVs out of this country? That is, if Canada truly wanted, this EV revolution, just open the gates to China. Like, let those cars come in. And they in turn will have said they will drop their tariffs on Canadian canola, which is a big industry for us, probably bigger than a lot of the things that, certainly bigger than the electric vehicle industry that we have right now. But obviously, you've probably heard Doug Ford say he doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want Canada to drop those 100% tariffs we have on Chinese EVs. And it doesn't seem like Carney at this point is willing to do that for some reason. Bullshit detector saying, do you understand that heavy crude is required for all plastics? Yes. I actually happen to be a chemist, bullshit detector. That's what I do as my career. I talk about these things because I do political stuff, content, because it's fun. But I'm actually a chemist in real life. Anyways, but I agree with you. There are several uses for crude outside just as fuel. I agree with that. Yeah, Wovenhart says it will also increase good jobs in Alberta. Okay, we're coming towards the end of the show today. I'll just catch up on all your comments and then we'll kind of tie it together. Bullshit detector says America uses 10 million barrels of heavy crude daily. Alberta should be supplying them. It totally should. And maybe this is the idea that Carney has with bringing up the Keystone XL pipeline with Donald Trump. Whenever they start talking again, whenever the man snaps out of the tantrum, maybe we can have a good discussion with them about reviving that Keystone. Oh, okay. I'll get to your comment, Lodzi. Okay, so bullshit detector says Trump has not followed through on that tariff. Trump's first executive order was to approve the Keystone XL pipeline. Yes, but he hasn't. That Keystone XL pipeline is not back on the table. Well, it's been brought up in discussions at this point. But as far as I know, I don't know that the Keystone XL pipeline, if I'm being honest, I don't know that the Keystone XL pipeline will get done, especially with the tensions we have with the United States at this point. Who knows? Wovenart says, won't buy it. Sorry, my right hand is injured and dropping letters. Wovenheart, heal up quick. Lodzi says, please check out Moose on the Loose. I know Moose on the Loose, not personally, but I know his show. We do have very differing interests. He's very much conservative, whereas I like to attack these issues from a neutral perspective. You'll probably notice from what I say that I do not think one side is completely evil. I found that there is no party that represents everything regarding my perspective, my position on things. I don't think there's any party that is adequately able to represent all that. So the practical person in me is not able to vouch for, a fully, conservative, I agree with them on everything, or fully vouch for the liberals. That's just the fact, right? And I think a lot of people are like that. A lot of people are pretty moderate, actually. But in this particular environment we're in now, people are forced to take sides. But Moose on the Loose does a good job, I gotta say, Lodzi. Moose on the Loose does a really good job. Typically, though, the job is to bring down Mark Carney as much as possible. That is typically what Moose on the Loose does. But he's good at what he does. I gotta say. I like Moose on the Loose. I like Northern Perspective as well. They're decent. But as I said, they have their blinders on for the Conservatives. So it depends on what you're into. I like to have these discussions where people from all sides are able to come in. I don't like echo chambers. That's just my perspective. Alberta bullshit detector says Alberta uses steam extraction for processing. It is the cleanest extraction on earth. It is approved. Canada refused to connect it. Well, now we're looking at a situation, bullshit detector, where Mark Carney is bringing up that idea again. So maybe it will get done this time, and it'll make you very happy, bullshit detector. Anthony Young says, what's your take on Russia and Chinese interference? Ooh. I'm assuming you mean interference in our electoral processes. I think that we need to secure our electoral processes a lot better. Yes, these countries are going to try and interfere. You can throw India into that discussion as well. And this is the reality of where we are right now. I don't think we should allow them interfere. We should secure our systems as much as we can, as best as we can. But does that mean that we should not trade with these countries? And this is a dilemma I think Canadians are facing right now. Because you might have heard recently that Mark Carney made a deal with the United Arab Emirates. He also is seeking to come to an agreement with India. And people have been saying, well, India is the same country that shot a Canadian citizen in broad daylight, allegedly. The United Arab Emirates, apparently is involved in supplying weapons I think it's in Sudan or something like that. And plus their human rights record. Should Canada be making a deal with countries like this? I don't know that we have a choice, right? We have to, as a country, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We can't, think about where we are today as a country. Canada is currently at war, trade war, with United States, China, India, because India just put a fresh tariff on Canadian goods. Russia, of course, right? We're fighting basically the biggest economic powers in the world right now. That is not a recipe for success, right? So as much as we have a conscience as a country, I think that we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Lodzi, I think you're still speaking about Moose on the Loose here. You say his chart ties a lot together for Carney and Brookfield. I think there's a fixation on Brookfield right now that I don't think that is going to yield a lot of fruit for the Conservatives. Even in the House of Commons, you hear a lot of Conservative MPs refer to the gains that Mark Carney is making for Brookfield. Okay. Okay. But I don't think that juice is going to yield as much. I don't think that is going to yield as much fruit for the Conservatives as they think. It didn't work during the election. I don't think it's working now. That's my opinion on this. I think the Conservatives have to rise above this a little bit. Yes, it's good to, throw a jab in there once in a while, but I don't think it serves them. That's just my thought. We're coming towards the end. So, okay. Bullshit Detector says Canada and the United States are importing heavy crude from Iran, Iraq, Venezuela instead of buying from Alberta. Well, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you wish someone would have, sat there and made this decision about how we can function effectively as a country. But somehow, the decisions we've made till this point have been to do exactly what you said, to make the dumbest decision ever, right? To sell our heavy crude to the United States, who have conveniently maintained enough capacity to be able to process our crude for us. Then they sell said, and this is, I think, some of the hypocrisy I find is going on in Quebec a little bit, where this Quebec people, not the people of Quebec, the Quebec leaders, I should say better, are saying, oh, we can never support oil. And then they proceed to import oil from the United States. It's not that they're not using oil, but they then proceed to import oil from the United States. They obviously, the refinery, I think in Quebec, processes some Alberta oil. I think it's through the capacity it is able to manage, it processes Alberta oil. But I'm just saying, there's a little bit of hypocrisy there where you're saying, oh, don't expand oil, but you still use oil in your, you use refined products that you now import from the United States, but you're like, don't touch oil. It's a little bit, it does kind of annoy me that in this country sometimes we don't function as a single unit. It is annoying. Anyways, Lodzi retracted her message. You were saying that Northern Perspective, I think I read that earlier where you said Northern Perspective says facts. As I said, when you watch these channels, they're good at what they do, but they do have blinders on. So just be aware of that. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not criticizing them for doing what they do. They have their political perspectives. The same thing with Elevate. Elevate podcast is a good conservative podcast as well. They're very good at what they do, but they have their blinders on. You could argue on the progressive side, Rachel Gilmore has her blinders on as well. But they're very good at what they do. Okay. I don't know what Lozzie said there. It was Anthony Young actually that said Northern Perspective gives facts. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking and just go through the comments because I think we're out of time actually. Bullshit Detector says, don't force Albertans to pay Canada's bills if you won't even if you won't even buy Alberta's products and refuse to stop blocking Alberta's energy projects. I mean, there is an opportunity, as I said now, for Alberta to get to increase their supply. As I said, with the TMX pipeline being the capacity of that being maximized, the possibility of another pipeline going to Vancouver, to the port of Vancouver, the possibility of the Keystone XL pipeline, like you mentioned, there are possibilities there. Things that maybe were not on the table for Alberta before, they're on there now. We're talking even these LNG projects when they get built, they're gonna be very, very good for Alberta. It's not just BC. There are pipeline infrastructure that are required to support these LNG projects. Those will be very, very beneficial for Alberta as well. Anthony Young says, BS, I agree, from Newfoundland. Are you from Newfoundland? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Anyways. Yeah, that's what I was saying. The Quebec does this thing where they buy Alberta oil from the United States instead of Alberta, which is insane when you think about it. Yeah, so that's what it is. Wovenheart says, that deal was part of the original NAFTA between Mulroney and Bush. They set the oil transfer limits. Okay. Anyways, we've had a good talk today, you guys. I love that. I love that you guys got involved today. If you're new to the channel, I do these live shows every Sunday, usually every Sunday. Last week I had a family thing to attend to, so I wasn't here. But I do these every Sunday. I bring a topic up. We have discussions from different perspectives. It does not matter if you're conservative or liberal. I'm not going to fight you. Okay, I'm not gonna fight you. I might say some stuff you disagree with. That is perfectly fine. You can disagree with me in the comments. We can have it out. Get in there. But if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and get in the comments. And when you see me make a video, whether you agree or disagree, don't worry. We're not gonna. It's gonna be okay. All right. The other thing, one more thing I'm doing that I gotta bring you guys up to speed with is I like soccer, apparently. I like soccer. Soccer is a sport I grew up with. And the World Cup draws were done this week. And you know what? If you're a soccer fan, get in the comments. Actually, I want to see some thumbs up if you're a soccer fan. But Canada low-key has a sneaky chance at this World Cup. Low-key, we have a sneaky chance at this World Cup. I think that there is a chance that Canada will win its first game at the World Cup next year. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, so for that, because I enjoy soccer so much, I've actually created a new channel where I'm going to be talking about Anthony Young. Oh, okay. Anthony Young is giving a thumbs up to Woven. Okay. Woven says, in the end, we're all Canadians. That we are. And we can have these discussions. It doesn't need to get crazy. In fact, it can get crazy. But we should always come back to being able to talk to each other. That is what I want to see, guys. That is what I want to see. Bullshit Detector says, Alberta has a 1,500 year supply of heavy crude. It's ridiculous not to use. You're right. Anthony Young says, football aces. Let's go. So, as I was saying, I've created a sports channel, and there's not going to be any politics on there. It's just going to be me talking about our soccer team, our Canadian soccer team. I'm going to be doing some scout reports, talking about some of our soccer players in this country. I hope Alphonso Davies is fit enough to make the World Cup. So I'm going to be making some fan content. I might invite some of my friends who are crazier about soccer than I am. And we'll just be chopping it up, nice and easy. Nothing political to get people mad. If you're going to get mad, you might break your TV or something because the team is so frustrating. But it is what it is. Thank you guys for joining me on the show today. It's been great. So I'm going to roll the credits now. All of you who contributed in the comments. Thank you, Woven Heart, for your comments today. Thank you, Anthony Young, for your comments today. Bullshit Detector, you're the absolute legend. Thank you, all of you. Who else was in here? Lodzi, there you are. Lodzi. Thank you for getting in the comments today. I hope you're back next week with me. Obviously, I'll make videos from between now and next week, but come with anything you want to talk about. Even if I don't have a response, I'm sure somebody in the comments will have something to say about it, and we can have a great discussion. Who else was here actually? Abby, you were so quiet today. Abby is usually one of the more chatty people in the comments, but not that many comments from Abby today. Braveheart as well dropped a few dimes in there. I think I got everybody. Yo, you guys have been legendary today. Absolutely legendary. Have yourselves a very, very good week. This week is the last week of Parliament. The House of Commons is closing down this week. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.